So I have questions. I appreciate that you're trying to improve the education in Florida. However, what you've done is raise the standards, and it seems as if you didn't put the supports in place in order to hold up those standards first. And I think that before making the high standards, the idea is that everyone learns it and learns what they need to know. So you need to make sure that the support is there first, and then people can achieve those standards. It's not suggesting that those standards are acceptable, but that everyone works together in order to achieve it. And to just say, okay, with the same amount of money, or an increase of some amount of money, but not fully what is needed, we're going to make those high standards, but not provide the appropriate training and information in order to make sure people can meet those standards, because that's ultimately the goal. We want everybody to learn. Speaking of which, so the FCAT, and we talked a little bit about the FCAT assessment process. One of the difficulties I've seen with the FCAT is, and it was brought up here today, you have a student who is seeming to learn and do well in school, but it does not match what's happening on the test. There's a disconnect. The other problem with it, and it kind of falls through as being part of the picture, is if you have a student who is accelerated and above grade level, and has been appropriately challenged in school to be doing work above grade level, but yet the assessment process of the FCAT is not taking this into consideration and is not testing the child about the information that they have learned that year. Instead, they're being tested on information that they learned prior year or 2 years ago, depending upon how, or 3 years, depending upon how accelerated that student is. So I would hope that as you move forward with the PARCC exam, that this is something which is taken into consideration to help meet the needs, so that you are matching what the child should be learning, meeting their needs if they are having learning disabilities, or if they are accelerated, that they are appropriately tested. So that, I guess they're not questions, they're points. And the other question is what I appreciate about PARCC is will that be a national norm reference test? Is that a well-tested assessment process? Okay. But the fact that we all, as parents, do not get that opportunity to be involved, to take that test and say, okay, this is what you need to know. And I know we do get the printout saying your child might have gotten the perfect score on the main idea, might have missed something on cause and effect, and you can do something else here. But sometimes reading those questions can make a difference in terms of being able to work with your child to help them learn and give that support to the teacher as well. And I think that's it.
Common Core in PARCC will allow us to have a national comparison that we do not have with the FCAT. When I was in Virginia, we had SOL, California has a different test, so Massachusetts. The tests were not created to be a national norm reference test, because every state has its own set of standards and knowledge. That's why they say let's have Common Core standards, so for English language arts and mathematics, we do a better job. We're part of PARCC, in fact, we're a governing board member and fiscal agent, so we should see better results there. The closest national exam we have across the board, we had our science scores come out in our board meeting, moving in the right direction in some of the subgroups, still too low. NAEP was important. Take a look at Massachusetts. They do better than anyone else on NAEP. People also need to know that NAEP's assessments are highly aligned with Massachusetts assessments. So are they doing better because the kids are smarter or because it's more aligned? Several years ago, Florida had an opportunity to decide whether it wanted to use NAEP as part of its assessment and decided not to. Interesting decision. We decided to go ahead and stay with what we have. So the assessments we're moving forward with are better national assessments to help us out. But there still will be a role for the state assessment because there's things we have in our laws that aren't federal. The part about the exam, so if you look at the results in grade 3 reading, grade 9 reading, with math coming out, what we predicted in December is 99.2% accurate. Why? Because we put in planning, we put in process, and we look at data. The writing was just a very different process. Next year in writing, you won't see the same type of impact because we had time to cut scores. I use the term cut, achievement scores. And we have more time to also evaluate it with data. We just simply did not do it with the writing. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Evelyn Torrey, and I'm part of the network of advocates for English language learners. You're well aware that the position of the Bureau Chief has been vacant since March 30th. Our question is, when is the information about the process and the timeline for making the decision for filling that position going to be available either to the applicants and or the public? And in addition to that, your ELL task force submitted a number of recommendations, only one of which was partially put through recently. And we want to know what it's going to take to give consideration to those other recommendations and to do that in time, that can be included in the waiver application due on July 15th.
Thank you for your question. So for part one, application position vacant May 22nd. April 9th to April 30th was a window for applicants to apply. Applicants did apply. It closed April 30th. From May 1st to May 14th, we whittled it down to 10 applicants. We also identified LULAC and FABUS as part of the review committee. We're going to take those 10 and move to 4 and have a decision within the next month.
Okay, thank you.
For part two, there were 35 recommendations. ELL provided 16. If you take a look at the sheets that I made available to the public, no, when I had no didn't mean never, just not now. We have until July to make some changes to our ESE application. The recommendations fall in 3 categories. Those that would be changed by statute, those that would change by policy, practice, and those that would take another staff in terms of policy work. A number of the ELL recommendations were not approved, either because there was a link to bonus points or because they would assess some students and not all students across the board, even though we know all students have certain needs. So that was number one. Number two, we actually went through every single recommendation with all of our voters, 1 through 35, and there were mixed results on yes, we would support this, no, we wouldn't support that. Because there were 16, should I have approved all 16? The answer is absolutely not, because some are statutory. Some of those will be taken to the board when we have our legislative review process to look forward. That'll bypass what takes place for the ESCA waiver. When we talked to the Department of Education, we gave them a number of recommendations. Several of those that came back and said, no, we would not do it. Now let's take a look at SELA. We don't sell it as an assessment that works. Some said they wanted to use it in addition to, some said in replacement of FCAT. We knew the replacement part was going to be a challenge. Could we have used it in partnership with other assessments? The question is yes. But in 2 years, because of our move to new assessments, SELA will not exist anymore. And so we had to keep that in mind. There were also some recommendations that we needed to add additional bonus points for ELL students who needed to reward them for certain gains, because their gains are needed. When I take a look at third grade writing and identify there were some increases in 0.3, 0.5, 0.4 over expectation, that was good. But also look as a whole, 43% of those students are also in level 1. We know that. But trying to add bonus points on for what we should be doing anyway for kids is something that I couldn't support, and it would also add on another level of bureaucracy. So when you say we need to make sure we give consideration, they were all considered. If the question is they all should have been approved, that's something different. 19, which was the majority, one from ELL, and a number of the SWB and center schools. Now, in no way am I saying that those were unimportant. But I also said to the ELL community, this is important to know, that I wanted them to really think broadly, not just in the script. Because ideas would come out of that by thinking broadly. But by thinking broadly, it also meant that some of those were simply outside statutory obligations that we could do for the feds. Some were outside the rulemaking framework, and some simply were not good bureaucratic positions. So as I told the ELL community, and I shared with you as well, when we get to the point where we're doing rulemaking, statute recommendations, that's the point where we give consideration, because some of those simply will take a statutory change.
Is it possible to request an extension of the waiver deadline so that there's time to incorporate that?
Well, we were already given an extension by July. Part of that was driven by SIG, so we have an extension that some of the other ones didn't. I did not ask for that extension, in particular as it relates to ELL, but the